On the morning of March 5th, 1979, two FBI agents appeared at the doorstep of a modest residence in Arlington Heights, Illinois, a Chicago suburb characterized by its tree-lined streets of ranch homes, where the primary concern for many locals was the Chicago Cubs' upcoming baseball season. The agent's visit was not for an arrest. Rather, it stemmed from a phone call the preceding Friday evening, originating from a couple who asserted their 13-year-old son had stumbled upon something extraordinary. This discovery, if verified, indicated a remarkably sophisticated Soviet intelligence operation, one of the most significant ever discovered on American soil. The boy had found a functional cipher concealed within the Sears, Roebuck and Company catalog, a substantial publication delivered to millions of American households, and a common fixture on coffee tables from the coast to coast. The subsequent investigation led to the arrest of at least 10 individuals, the disruption of a clandestine communication network, and a fundamental shift in how American counterintelligence approached methods like dead drops and coded messages. The boy's name was Michael Hartley. To comprehend his discovery, one must understand him and the global context of the spring of 1979. The Cold War had been ongoing for over 3 decades. While its intensity had somewhat diminished from the near-apocalyptic tensions of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the espionage activities between the United States and the Soviet Union remained as vigorous as ever. Both the KGB and the CIA continued to operate agents within each other's capitals. The American intelligence community was still grappling with the fallout from revelations about domestic surveillance programs run by the CIA, exposed just a few years prior during the Church Committee hearings, fostering an atmosphere of paranoia and distrust that had permeated American society. Concurrently, the Soviets had been implicated in running at least 3 major spy networks within the United States during the 1970s, and counterintelligence officials were aware that others remained undetected. Michael Hartley resided with his parents, Gordon and Patricia Hartley, and his younger sister, Rachel, in a close-knit neighborhood where residents knew each other well and children played outdoors until the streetlights came on. Gordon was employed as an electrical engineer at Motorola's Arlington Heights facility, and Patricia worked as a substitute teacher at the local middle school. Michael attended the same middle school, where he was known as a quiet, brilliant, and distinct individual whom both teachers and fellow students found difficult to fully describe. This was 1979. The concept of an autism spectrum disorder would not be formally recognized in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual until 1980. Most Americans had likely never encountered the term or quote or unless they had seen the movie or quote on Neats, which would not be released until 1988. However, Michael's parents were aware that their son perceived the world differently from other children. He had begun speaking late, not managing full sentences until nearly 4 years of age. Yet, by age 6, he was reading at a high school level. He found eye contact challenging, small talk nearly impossible, and was easily overwhelmed by loud noises or unexpected changes in his routine. He also developed intensely focused, almost obsessive interests that would occupy him fully for months or even years. His current preoccupation, which had dominated his life since the previous summer, was patterns. Specifically, he was fascinated by numerical patterns, particularly codes and ciphers. This interest was ignited when his father brought home a book from the library titled The Code Breakers by David Kahn, a comprehensive 200-page history of cryptography. While most 13-year-olds might have skimmed it cursorily, Michael read it from beginning to end 3 times. He then proceeded to borrow every book on codes and cryptography available at the Arlington Heights library system. He self-taught himself about substitution ciphers, transposition ciphers, one-time pads, the Enigma machine, Navajo code talkers, Julius Caesar's cipher, and the Zimmerman telegram. His notebooks were filled with his own encryption systems, where he devised elaborate codes for seemingly mundane messages like "Mayan's quote, yes one, ed or quote, 2." These messages did not require secrecy, but Michael encoded them for the sheer enjoyment of the process, the mathematical elegance of concealing information in plain sight. His parents viewed this as a harmless, even endearing trait. When Michael became interested in something, he pursued it with a singular intensity that was both demanding and impressive. Patricia Hartley would later recount to investigators her occasional concerns about Michael's ability to form friendships or navigate social situations requiring spontaneity and emotional nuance. However, she never doubted his intellect. By all accounts, he was exceptionally bright. His teachers corroborated this assessment. Michael's math teacher, Eleonora Kowalski, informed the FBI that Michael had largely ceased participating in her 8th grade algebra class by October, having taught himself calculus over the summer and finding the standard curriculum unengaging. He would sit at the back of the classroom, working through college-level mathematics textbooks he checked out from the public library while she instructed his classmates on quadratic equations. The Sears catalog entered Michael's life in the same manner it reached millions of other American homes, through the mail. The Spring-Summer 1979 catalog arrived at the Hartley residence during the first week of February. It was a substantial publication of 400 pages, weighing over 2 pounds, its glossy pages displaying an array of products from washing machines and wedding rings to power tools and patio furniture, boys' jeans and fishing rods. The catalog was as integral to American culture as baseball or apple pie, a venerable institution established in 1888 that found its way into virtually every household nationwide. For most individuals, it served as a shopping guide, enabling them to browse and order merchandise conveniently from home. For Michael Hartley, however, it became something entirely different. He first noticed the anomaly on Sunday afternoon, February 11th, 1979. The family had just returned from church, and Michael was lying on the living room floor with the catalog open, a common occurrence. He frequently examined catalogs, phone books, or dictionaries, not with the intention of purchasing, calling, or defining words, but because he appreciated their structured organization and the systematic presentation of information. On this particular afternoon, he was browsing the automotive section, perusing pages dedicated to car batteries and motor oil, when something captured his attention. Certain product descriptions appeared unusual, not factually incorrect, but phrased awkwardly, deviating from the natural cadence of the catalog's overall text. Most people would have attributed this to poor copywriting or a printing error. Michael's cognitive processes, however, operated differently. When he encountered something that disrupted a pattern, it bothered him akin to a musical piece played out of key would disturb someone with perfect pitch. He began to systematically examine the catalog page by page, reading every product description. And he started to identify more instances of these slightly irregular phrases scattered throughout the book. They appeared perhaps once every 40 to 50 pages, invariably nestled within dense text where the majority of readers' eyes would likely skim over them. He initiated the process of taking notes. In a brand new composition notebook, he began meticulously recording each unusual phrase he encountered, along with its corresponding page number, product category, and item number. This task was painstaking and would have frustrated most teenagers, but Michael found it strangely calming. He derived satisfaction from the methodical nature of the search and recording process. By the end of that first day, he had documented 17 phrases. By the end of the week, the total had risen to 43. The phrases themselves seemed innocuous, such as tested under extreme northern conditions, available in regional markets only, and recommended for industrial applications. They represented the kind of generic technical language commonly found in countless product descriptions throughout the catalog. However, Michael had observed that these specific phrases violated certain grammatical or logical conventions that were consistently applied elsewhere in the document. On February 18th, precisely 1 week after commencing his endeavor, Michael decided to test the hypothesis. He had been reading about number stations, those enigmatic shortwave radio broadcasts that transmitted seemingly random sequences of numbers or words, widely believed to be coded messages for covert agents operating in enemy territory. These broadcasts had been documented since World War I, and despite decades of monitoring by intelligence agencies, no government had ever officially admitted to operating them. Michael speculated whether the phrases from the Sears catalog could function similarly. He theorized they might be messages concealed in plain sight, intended only for individuals possessing the knowledge to locate them and the skill to decipher them. He began with the most straightforward approach, one utilized in cryptography for centuries. He extracted the first letter of each unusual phrase in the order they appeared in the catalog, from beginning to end, and wrote them down sequentially, The result was Terry Motel Cap. This yielded nothing but seemingly random letters. He then tried the last letter of each phrase, which also produced no discernible message. He experimented with taking the first letter of every second phrase, then every third, and then every fifth. He explored numerological techniques, assigning numerical values to letters. He also examined the product numbers themselves, searching for mathematical relationships. None of his attempts yielded results. Days turned into weeks, and Michael filled page after page of his notebook with unsuccessful attempts. Most individuals would have abandoned the pursuit, concluding that they were merely perceiving patterns where none existed, and that the awkward phrasing was simply that, awkward phrasing and nothing more. However, Michael's unique cognitive disposition made abandoning a task nearly impossible once he had become convinced that a pattern was present. His mother would later recount to FBI investigators how Michael would return home from school, grab a snack, and retreat directly to his room to work on what he termed the catalog problem. He sometimes skipped dinner, so engrossed in his efforts that he wouldn't hear his mother calling him. His academic performance, which had consistently been excellent, began to decline slightly, not due to an inability to complete the assignments, but because he was dedicating all his time to the code rather than his schoolwork. The crucial insight occurred on March 2, 1979, nearly 3 weeks after he had commenced his work. That evening, Michael was lying in bed, contemplating all his unsuccessful attempts. He had been approaching the problem under the assumption that the message was embedded within the text itself. However, he pondered, what if the text wasn't the message? What if the text merely served as a marker, a pointer to something else? He rose from bed, switched on his desk lamp, and retrieved the catalog once more. He examined one of the phrases he had earmarked, tested under extreme northern conditions, which appeared on page 487 within the description for a set of jumper cables. The item number was 369487. He questioned whether the numbers might hold more significance than the words. He began to jot down only the numbers associated with each unusual phrase, the page number and the item number, 48736947. He attempted to add them, subtract them, and search for prime numbers, but found nothing. Then he recalled something from his study of code breaking, a section discussing book codes where a sequence of numbers would refer to specific pages, lines, and words within a widely available book. For the code to function, both parties would need to possess the same edition of the same book. The Sears catalog proved ideal for this purpose. Millions of identical copies were distributed freely, residing in households across America, making them untraceable. He considered another possibility. What if the numbers were not the code itself, but rather coordinates pointing to other locations within the catalog? He took the first unusual phrase he had found on page 127, item number 846234. He turned to page 84 of the catalog. On that page, he counted down to the 62nd line of text and examined the 34th character. It was an M. He wrote it down. He then took the second unusual phrase, page 316, item number 52, 89 Wimpfteve. He turned to page 52, counted to the 89th line and the 15th character, revealing the letter T. He continued this process with the third, fourth, and fifth phrases, yielding the letters M, T, S, U, N, D, A, Y. He stared at those 7 letters for a full minute before he comprehended what they formed. Empty Sunday, Mount Sunday, Empty Sunday. Then it struck him. It wasn't empty. It was an abbreviation. Meeting, Empty Sunday, Meet Sunday. His hands trembled now as he worked through the remaining unusual phrases he had cataloged, a total of 43. Each one yielded a new letter or number based on the page, line, and character coordinates hidden within the item numbers. The complete message, once he decoded all 43 phrases, read, Sunday 1800. Grant Park, bench 47, red scarf, confirmed via usual channel package ready. Michael sat at his desk, gazing at his transcription. For the first time in the 3 weeks he had been wrestling with this problem, he felt genuine fear. This was no longer an academic exercise. It was real. Someone had embedded a hidden message within the Sears catalog, a message concerning a rendezvous in Grant Park in Chicago, scheduled for 1800 hours, 6 p.m. on a Sunday. Someone would be present, identifiable by a red scarf, and a package was prepared. The language, the structure, the inherent secrecy, all pointed to a single conclusion: espionage. He descended the stairs and found his parents in the den, watching television. His father was perusing the newspaper, his mother was knitting, and a sitcom played on the television. Neither seemed to be paying close attention. Michael stood in the doorway for a moment, uncertain how to begin. Finally, he simply said, "I need to show you something." His voice must have conveyed sufficient urgency, as both parents immediately looked up. They followed him back to his room, where he had laid out the catalog, his notebooks, his pages of calculations and failed attempts, and finally, the successful decryption. He explained everything, walking them through precisely how he had discovered the pattern and how the code operated. Gordon Hartley's initial reaction was skepticism. He picked up the notebook, examined Michael's work, then the catalog, and asked his son if he was absolutely certain he had completed this correctly. Michael reiterated the process for him, step by step. Gordon, being an engineer, understood mathematical systems and logical processes. He could ascertain that Michael's methodology was sound, that the pattern was tangible and not imaginary. Patricia Hartley's first question was what they should do about it. Michael confessed he didn't know, which was why he was informing them. The three of them sat in Michael's room for nearly an hour, deliberating on potential courses of action. Perhaps it was insignificant. Perhaps it was some sort of elaborate marketing campaign. Perhaps it was a treasure hunt. However, the message's wording did not support these theories. Meet Sunday, Grant Park, red scarf, package ready. This was language indicative of tradecraft. It was how spies communicated. Gordon made the decision that they should contact the FBI. It was late, past 10 p.m. on a Friday, but he looked up the number for the FBI's Chicago field office in the phone book and dialed the main line. He reached a duty officer. Gordon explained he had information regarding what might be a coded message being employed for espionage, emphasizing that he was serious, and this was not a prank. The duty officer, to his credit, took down the information, including the Hartley family's address and phone number, and stated that someone would follow up. Gordon had no certainty if anyone actually would, but someone did. On Monday morning, March 5th, an FBI agent named Thomas Kovach called the Hartley residence. Gordon was already at work, so Patricia answered and explained that her husband had made the initial call, but it was their son who had actually discovered the code. Kovach inquired if he could visit the house that afternoon to discuss the matter further. Patricia agreed. That afternoon, around 3 p.m., Kovach arrived. He was in his late 30s, dressed in a dark suit, polite yet professionally skeptical. Patricia offered him coffee. Michael returned home from school around 3:30 p.m. and found an FBI agent seated at his kitchen table. Kovach asked Michael to explain his findings. Michael complied, retrieving the catalog and his notebooks, and recounting the entire process just as he had done for his parents. Kovach listened, posed questions, and took notes. He was particularly interested in the timeline. When had the catalog been delivered? When had Michael first discerned the pattern? When had he deciphered the code? Michael provided the dates: February 7th for the catalog's arrival, February 11th for noticing the pattern, and March 2nd for its resolution. This implied the message had been present in the catalog for nearly a month before anyone had decoded it. The mentioned meeting, Meet Sunday, had presumably already transpired. The precise date was not specified, and several Sundays had passed since the catalog's delivery. However, Kovach explained that the catalog was distributed over several weeks, with different regions receiving it at varying times. If the message was genuine, if this was indeed an espionage communication system, the Sunday in question was likely not a specific calendar date, but rather the first Sunday after the catalog's receipt, or possibly a Sunday a certain number of weeks after receipt. This was a common practice with timing codes that accommodated variations in distribution. Kovach departed with the catalog and Michael's notebooks, promising to have analysts examine them. He instructed the Hartley family not to discuss the matter with anyone. He provided them with his direct phone number and advised them to call if they recalled any further details. He then left, and the Hartley family was left alone with the knowledge that their son might have uncovered a Soviet spy ring, and that the FBI was now involved in their lives. What the Hartley family did not know, and what Agent Kovach did not disclose that first day, was that the FBI had been actively searching for precisely this type of operation for years. Soviet intelligence possessed a lengthy history of employing innovative communication methodologies. In the 1950s and 60s, they had utilized microdots, minuscule photographs reduced to the size of a period in typed text, concealed within letters or magazines. They had also employed invisible ink, radio transmissions, and sophisticated dead drop systems, where agents would deposit materials in public locations for retrieval by other agents who never met face to face. However, by the late 1970s, American counterintelligence had become highly adept at detecting these traditional methods. Microdots were discoverable under microscopic examination. Invisible ink could be revealed through chemical treatment. Radio transmissions were susceptible to triangulation, and dead drops could be placed under surveillance. The FBI understood that the Soviets must have developed new, more discreet methods, but they were unaware of what those methods entailed. A communication system embedded within a mass-market catalog was ingeniously simple. The Sears catalog was ubiquitous, untraceable, and entirely innocuous. A Soviet agent residing in America could receive the catalog like anyone else, keep it on their coffee table or bookshelf without arousing suspicion, and decode messages at their convenience in the privacy of their own home. There were no suspicious radio devices to explain, no furtive trips to parks or phone booths, no encrypted letters that might be intercepted, just a catalog that millions of people received and that no one would scrutinize further. Within 48 hours of Agent Kovach's visit to the Hartley residence, a full contingent of FBI cryptanalysts and counterintelligence specialists were meticulously examining Michael's work. They validated his methodology, confirmed the pattern's reality, and commenced efforts to identify its creator and the potential scope of its impact on other catalogs. Copies of prior Sears catalogs were retrieved from FBI archives and public libraries, spanning 2 years, to search for similar patterns. These were indeed found. The fall 1978 catalog contained them, as did the spring 1978 catalog and the fall 1977 catalog. Each catalog featured between 35 and 50 unusually worded product descriptions. When deciphered using the page and line system Michael had identified, these descriptions revealed a message. The messages were consistently brief and operational, detailing meeting locations, times, recognition signals, instructions for acquiring materials, and confirmations of past information. The FBI uncovered a communication network that had been operating successfully undetected by American authorities for a minimum of 2 years, and possibly longer. The investigation, codenamed Operation Catalog by the FBI, expanded rapidly. FBI counterintelligence sought to determine how the messages were initially inserted into the catalog. Sears, Roebuck and Company was headquartered in Chicago within the Sears Tower, a building recently completed in 1973 and then the world's tallest. The catalog's production was a vast undertaking involving hundreds of employees, including copywriters, editors, photographers, designers, and production staff. Introducing a coded message into the catalog would necessitate an insider, someone with access to the copywriting and editing stages, who could embed unconventional phrases into product descriptions without drawing attention. FBI agents interviewed Sears executives on March 12, 1979, stating they were investigating a potential security breach and requesting a complete roster of all employees involved in catalog production. Sears offered full cooperation, though its management appeared perplexed by the FBI's inquiry. The employee list was extensive, comprising over 300 individuals with some level of access to catalog content. The FBI initiated a vetting process for all these individuals, conducting background checks and looking for any ties to Soviet intelligence or suspicious activities. This was meticulous, slow work. Concurrently, the FBI aimed to identify the recipients of these messages and the means of their delivery. The messages themselves offered some clues. Meet Sunday, 1800, Grant Park, Bench 47, Red Scarf. Grant Park was a large public space in downtown Chicago, adjacent to Lake Michigan. Bench 47 could have referred to any of the hundreds of benches in the park. However, FBI agents familiar with the park noted that many benches were actually numbered, a detail seldom noticed by visitors. These numbered benches were part of a sponsorship program, where individuals could dedicate a bench in someone's honor, each bearing a small plaque with a number. Bench 47 did exist, situated on the eastern side of the park, facing the lake and comparatively secluded. The FBI placed the bench under surveillance, though by this time, any meetings mentioned in the Spring catalog had likely already occurred. They also revisited their archives, examining previous decoded messages from older catalogs to detect patterns in meeting locations and times. A significant finding emerged. While several messages referenced Chicago locations, others pointed to Milwaukee, Detroit, and Cleveland. This indicated a regional network rather than a single city operation. The breakthrough in identifying the Sears insider came on March 24, 1979, nearly 3 weeks into the investigation. FBI background checks flagged a copywriter named Alexei Pitishin, age 41, employed by Sears's catalog division. Pitishin was a naturalized American citizen, born in the Soviet Union, who had immigrated to the United States in 1962 at the age of 24, during a period of eased Soviet immigration restrictions. He had held various jobs before joining Sears, most recently as a technical writer for a manufacturing firm. His employment record was unblemished. His references had been verified upon hiring by Sears, and he had shown no issues during his 3 years with the company. However, the FBI's more in-depth investigation uncovered information unknown to Sears. Prior to immigrating, Pitishin had served 3 years in the Soviet Army, including a period in military intelligence. This detail had been omitted from his immigration paperwork. While not definitive proof of espionage, it warranted closer scrutiny. The FBI obtained authorization for surveillance and began monitoring Pitishin's communications, mail, and movements. They also deployed an undercover agent posing as a temporary copywriter within the Sears catalog division, tasked with observing Pitishin's work habits and relationships. Over the ensuing weeks, they observed a pattern of increasingly suspicious behavior. Pitishin worked unconventional hours, often staying late after most employees had departed. He had access to the catalog's editing system and frequently made what he termed minor corrections to product descriptions, changes so small they seldom underwent a second review. The undercover agent witnessed him implementing these changes late at night, working from a handwritten list kept in his desk drawer, a list he was diligent about not leaving unattended. On April 18, 1979, the FBI decided to act. They apprehended Alexei Pitishin at his residence in Evanston, Illinois, at 6:00 a.m. Simultaneously, 7 other individuals were arrested, 4 in Chicago, 2 in Milwaukee, and 1 in Cleveland, all suspected of involvement in the communication network. The arrests were coordinated to occur at the exact same time, preventing any member from alerting the others. The FBI operation was highly classified, and the method by which they identified the other operatives remains unknown to this day. Pitishin's home was searched, yielding materials that validated their suspicions. Concealed within a false-bottom drawer in his bedroom dresser, beneath layers of clothing, were 3 items: a one-time pad, a cipher key for encoding and decoding messages, a Soviet passport under his birth name, Dmitry Kavern, not Alexei Pitishin, and a list of product categories and page ranges for the forthcoming Fall 1979 Sears catalog, complete with handwritten notes in Russian indicating which categories would feature the next set of encoded messages. The FBI had successfully dismantled the ring, but the investigation was far from concluded. Pitishin declined to cooperate, invoking his right to remain silent and requesting legal counsel. The other arrested individuals, many of whom were Soviet nationals residing in the United States on student or work visas, also refused to speak. However, the evidence discovered in their residences painted a clear picture. These were KGB operatives running an intelligence-gathering network, utilizing the Sears catalog as their primary communication channel for at least 2 years, possibly longer. The information they collected, based on documents seized during the raids, included technical specifications for American manufacturing equipment, details on industrial production methods, insights into labor strikes and economic conditions in key industries, and maps of military installations and defense contractor facilities. While not top-tier military secrets, this constituted valuable intelligence, providing Soviet planners with an understanding of American manufacturing capabilities and vulnerabilities. The ring had operated discreetly and successfully, gathering and transmitting information through a communication system so simple and so seamlessly integrated into everyday life that no one had thought to investigate it until a 13-year-old boy with autism and a fascination for codes decided to examine the Sears catalog with unprecedented scrutiny. The trial of Alexei Petition commenced in September 1979 in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Illinois. The prosecution's case relied on the physical evidence discovered during his arrest and the search of his home: the one-time pad, the cipher keys, and the Soviet passport, corroborated by testimony from FBI agents concerning the catalog code system and its utilization. Michael Hartley was never called to testify. The FBI determined his involvement was unnecessary to secure a conviction and sought to shield a minor from the potential scrutiny and danger of being identified as the individual who exposed the operation. The trial spanned 6 weeks. In November 1979, Alexei Petition was convicted on 4 counts of espionage under the Espionage Act and sentenced to 35 years in federal prison. The other defendants received sentences ranging from 10 to 25 years. 2 of them, Soviet nationals, were eventually deported in 1983 after serving reduced sentences as part of a prisoner exchange. Petition remained in federal custody and was not part of any exchange. He passed away in prison in 1997. The FBI's inquiry into the extent of encoded messages in other Sears catalogs continued for another year. They meticulously examined every catalog dating back to 1975, the year Petition was believed to have first been approached by Soviet intelligence. Ultimately, they discovered encoded messages in 12 different catalog editions, including specialized catalogs produced between 1977 and spring 1979. The fall 1979 catalog and all subsequent Big Book editions were clear of such messages, as the FBI had by then discreetly collaborated with Sears to implement additional review procedures for catalog copy, thereby preventing future infiltration. Sears itself was never implicated in any wrongdoing. The company had been compromised by a Soviet agent who had infiltrated its employee ranks, yet no evidence suggested that anyone at Sears, besides Petition, was aware of the situation. Michael Hartley's involvement was kept confidential for an extended period. He and his family were cautioned against discussing the events and adhered to this directive. Life subsequently resumed a semblance of normalcy. This new normal, however, encompassed periodic visits from FBI agents who sought further information or required Michael's expertise in deciphering similar patterns within other documents. Michael returned to his academic pursuits, re-engaging with his mathematics courses and his notebooks filled with cryptographic codes. His instructors remained unaware that their reserved and socially reserved student had successfully decoded a Soviet espionage cipher. His peers never realized that the student in the back row, diligently working on advanced mathematics problems, had also assisted the FBI in one of the most crucial counterintelligence apprehensions of the latter part of the Cold War. Michael Hartley concluded his high school education in 1983 and matriculated at MIT, where he pursued mathematics, obtaining his PhD by 1991. He subsequently embarked on a notable career in cryptography and cybersecurity, ultimately working for a defense contractor on sensitive projects. He never publicly revisited the Sears catalog incident, although those familiar with him and his story noted his enduring fascination with patterns and codes throughout his life. The Sears catalog itself carried on until 1993, at which point the company phased out the extensive format in favor of specialized publications, succumbing to evolving retail dynamics and the proliferation of computerized shopping technologies. At its zenith, the catalog reached 40 million American homes, arguably representing the most widely circulated single publication in the United States. How many other individuals received these catalogs between 1977 and 1979 and failed to perceive the hidden pattern within them? Millions. Michael Hartley was the sole individual to detect it, the one whose unique cognitive approach caused those slightly peculiar phrases to stand out as irregularities worthy of investigation. Amidst the immense apparatus of Cold War intelligence and counterintelligence, with its surveillance satellites, supercomputers, and legions of analysts, a 13-year-old boy's meticulous attention to detail and aptitude for pattern recognition accomplished what all others had overlooked.